In the midst of our cozy homes, we often forget that the boundaries between civilization and the untamed world can blur in an instant. An unexpected intruder bursts through the door, shattering the illusion of safety. In some rare and terrifying instances, bears can turn into uninvited guests, driven by their insatiable appetite for food. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. In today's episode, we go over 3 times bears have broken into someone's home and fatally mauled them. Welcome to Final Affliction. In this attack, there were no witnesses, and so the story of the events cannot be fully verified. But based on known behavior of bears and evidence left at the scene of the attack, the following scenario has been presented. It was August 1993, and 24-year-old Collin McClelland headed out from his home in Buena Vista, Colorado. He was a logger by trade and often set up his camping trailer in the forests near his home whilst he carried out his work. He could be gone for days at a time, making a living in the great outdoors. An hour's drive south of Buena Vista lies Cotopaxi and Wah Mountain. This is where Collin was headed this particular summer. It is situated near the Arkansas River Valley and about 35 miles southwest of Cannon City. It was an area that Collin was familiar with, having been logging there before. When he reached the site where he was to begin felling trees, he set up his camping trailer. He loved the outdoors and the freedom that working as a logger gave him. When the weather was hot and sunny, there could be nothing better. But that summer had been particularly dry. Much of Colorado had experienced a drought, which had affected regional wildlife. Rivers and lakes were low, and food availability was scarce. This could have led to the following attack: an attack by a black bear. Colorado is home to a significant population of black bears. The exact number of black bears in Colorado is difficult to determine with precision, as bear populations can fluctuate and are influenced by various factors, such as habitat availability and food sources. However, according to the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, it is estimated that the state has a black bear population of around 19,000 to 20,000 bears. These bears are found throughout Colorado, primarily in forested habitats and mountainous regions, the type of habitat that young Collin set to work in. But this was something he knew. He was aware of the risks of working in bear country, and he took the necessary precautions. He always left his garbage and waste food outside his trailer, and whilst out working in the woods, Collin always carried with him his high-powered rifle. He had come across bears in the area before, and he felt safer with his rifle by his side. It was the only protection he needed. Whilst felling trees, he always kept an eye out, and, apart from the occasional bold bear, most would run away at the sound of his chainsaw or upon seeing him in the distance. Wildlife officials recommend a high-powered firearm or bear spray to deter bears. Less powerful weapons are not recommended and are unlikely to stop a charging bear. Missing a bear or merely injuring it can enrage the bear, leading to a ferocious attack and potential fatalities. There has long been a debate over the preferred bear deterrent, bear spray or firearm. After working in the forest for a few days, Collin was bothered once more by a curious black bear. In fact, this bear had caused trouble before and was known to local wildlife officials. It had broken into nearby trailers, searching and scavenging for food. The recent drought had made matters worse. The berry harvest, a food that black bears rely on, was at an all-time low. Food was scarce. The bear was likely attracted to Collin's trailer and the smell of food and garbage. The following has been assumed from the details presented by investigators and wildlife experts. No one knows for sure exactly what happened to Collin. During the night, Collin was awoken by a noise. It was the sound of crashing outside his trailer. There was a commotion, and Collin peered out of the window to see what it was. In the moonlight, he could just make out the outline of a black bear, the same one he had seen previously. It was sniffing around his campsite, turning over his garbage, and scouring the area for food. It muzzled his bin bags, tearing them open with its claws. The bear was hungry. Collin watched from the safety of his trailer. He didn't utter a sound. But then, to his absolute horror, the bear approached the trailer door. It was a thin door, secured only by a single, flimsy latch. Collin reached for his rifle. He always kept it propped up by his bedside. He clutched it in his hands, loaded it, and held it ready, pointing it towards the bear. His heart was thundering in his chest as he heard the growling sound of the bear and the clacking of its jaws as it sniffed the trailer door. It nudged it with its head. The door shook slightly. The latch held out. Collin aimed the rifle at the door. His heart was in his mouth. Any moment now, he was expecting the bear to charge through the door. Any minute now, it would launch itself into his trailer. He held his breath. The bear stood on its hind legs and clawed at the door with its huge front paws. The flimsy latch gave way under the weight of the bear, and Collin fired his first shot. In the darkness, he missed the bear. The sound of the rifle sent the bear running. It fled the scene, but Collin knew it would be back. The bear had scarpered into the surrounding woodland, but as its courage grew, the bear returned moments later. It charged towards the open door of the trailer. Collin fired his rifle again. He shot through the walls of the trailer. This time the bullet struck the bear. Striking the bear on its body, the shot had injured it slightly. The shot wasn't going to stop the bear. It only enraged it. With adrenaline surging through the animal's body, it didn't feel the pain from the bullet. It didn't feel fear. Instead, it came crashing through the trailer door, and before Collin could reload his weapon, the bear was upon him. It pounced on him, its huge frame knocking Collin to the floor in an instant. He would have tried desperately to protect himself, to cover his face, head, and neck, but the animal overpowered him, mauling him, inflicting deep and devastating wounds with its teeth and claws. Investigators who arrived on the scene much later found shots had been fired through the trailer walls from the inside out. They found the door had buckled, and from his injuries, it was concluded that Collin most likely died inside his trailer. But what followed will haunt his friends and family forever. The bear wasn't finished with the young man yet. The initial attack had been sparked by an injured and enraged bear. It likely wasn't deliberately hunting Collin at the time, but it had been searching for food and had been driven to investigate the tantalizing scents coming from inside Collin's trailer. But now, although the bear had neutralized what it saw as a threat, it was still hungry. After retreating into the surrounding woodland for some time, the bear then returned to the trailer once more. Now it was bold and unafraid. Stepping up into Collin's abode, it dragged Collin's body outside to the door, and there it feasted upon Collin's lifeless body. When Collin didn't show up for a court appearance a couple of days later, his friends grew concerned. He was out of contact deep within the wilderness. His friends went searching for him. They knew where he would be. He had been logging in the same region before, and they had visited him there in the past. As they walked up the narrow path that led to Collin's trailer, they made the gruesome discovery. It was a harrowing find for the youngsters, a sad and traumatic end to a young man's life. Willie Travnicek from the Colorado Division of Wildlife was tasked with capturing the bear responsible for Collin's death. He and colleagues set up a barrel trap 50 feet from Collin's camp. Sure enough, the following night, the bear returned to the campsite. This time it was enticed into the trap, and the 250-pound animal was found there the following morning. Willie tranquilized the bear and sent it off to Salida, half an hour northwest of Cotopaxi. When the bear was examined, it was found to have a gunshot wound in its side. From this, and the fact that the bear was in the camp's vicinity, it was concluded that this was the bear that had killed Collin. In light of this evidence, the bear was destroyed. People should take every necessary precaution to protect themselves when camping out in the wilderness. Wild animals like black bears might seem docile, but they're still dangerous predators that should be respected and treated with caution. Collin's story is a tragic reminder of what can happen when we let our guard down We should always be aware of our surroundings and take steps to ensure our safety, especially when entering the territory of fearsome predators such as bears. Nevertheless, while we can't save the ones we have lost, we can always aspire to protect the ones we haven't, and hopefully spare them the unimaginable horror of witnessing their final affliction. Whether you think bears are cute, funny, or scary, it is generally agreed that they should be avoided. Usually, brown bears will only attack humans if they are scared or threatened. This alone should encourage people to leave the animal alone. However, if they choose not to, they are unlikely to survive the tale, as brown bears are 20 times more dangerous than their black subspecies. Knowing this, it makes our topic for today even scarier. We will be looking at one of the worst bear attacks ever recorded, which left 7 people dead and 3 more injured in a terrifying rampage that lasted 5 days. The Ussuri subspecies of brown bear is found on the northern Japanese island of Hokkaido, having been driven to extinction everywhere else in Japan. These bears are particularly feared in Japan as they are very large and well known to attack humans, having killed over 200 people in the last century alone. All of these attacks were usually isolated, and only 1 or 2 people would die. However, one bear nicknamed Kasagake, meaning wind shadow, would change this forever. In the winter of 1915, in Sakabetsu, the animal was first spotted. Measuring at nearly 9 meters tall and 340 kilograms, this bear was a truly terrifying size. He had woken up early from hibernation and was now starving, so he approached a family farm. Although he scared the Ikeda family that lived there, he was only interested in their corn that they were growing in the field, and when their horse started making noise due to its panic, the bear was scared off. A few days later, the bear came back. This time, the family wanted to make sure that it didn't return, and so the head of the family arranged for his second son, Kamataro, and 2 local hunters to be ready for when the bear came back. When he then reappeared for the 3rd time 10 days later, they shot at him several times, but Kasagake was only injured and retreated into the forest. The men tracked him into the forest, following the bloodstains that he left behind in the snow, but soon conditions became too treacherous and they had to give up their search. They came to the conclusion that he would not return, as he had been taught to associate humans with pain and so would be too scared to return. They were wrong. On December 9, 1915, Kasagake completed his first kill, the Ota family. That morning, the wife of the house, Abe Mayu, was inside, babysitting her friend's young baby, Hasumi Mikio, while her husband tended to the farm nearby. The pair were inside the house, unaware of the danger and simply going about the morning routine of caring for a small child. At 10:30 a.m., the bear arrived at the home of the Ota family. He suddenly attacked the baby, killing him instantly with a savage bite to the head. Mayu was screaming, terrified for her own life, but also in horror of tiny Mikio's own demise. She hoped that her husband would hear her and save her from this massive animal, and began throwing firewood to scare it away. She ran for the door, but Kasagake was blocking it and knocked her to the ground before dragging her out of the house and into the forest to finish her off. Unfortunately, no one came to save her, and she was killed by the bear. When her husband returned from the farm, he collapsed. The farmhouse was covered in pools of blood, and the body of Mikio was still in the middle of the room. He was devastated that his wife was gone. He had no hope of her survival against a bear. No one had any hope against such an animal. The next day, 30 men entered the forest to hunt down the bear and recover what was left of Mayu's body. They didn't have to search for long. 150 meters into the forest, they saw a large, shadowy figure in front of them and knew it was the culprit. 5 of the 30 men began shooting at the bear, but only 1 was able to hit him. Although this enraged the bear, it retreated into the forest and did not attack the men. Feeling accomplished, They continued with their journey into the forest and began following bloodstains that they found in the snow. This led them to the dismembered body of Abe Mayu. She had been mostly devoured by the animal, and so only her head and legs remained. It was a truly horrific sight to see. Her body had been partially buried in the snow, that it could be preserved for the bear to return to later on. Her husband took Mayu's remains back home with him. That evening, the bear returned to the Ota family home once again, but although the villagers shot at him once again, he escaped unhurt. After hearing about the attacks and hearing the shots within the forest, the women and children of the village had begun to panic. They all sought refuge at the house of Miyoki Yasutaro and gathered together, while only one guardsman was stationed outside to protect them. That night, Miyoki Yasutaro's wife, Yayo, was preparing a meal with some of the other women while carrying her son, Umakichi, on her back. She heard rustling behind her, and before she even had time to turn, Kazagake smashed through the window, sending glass flying everywhere. As the cooking pot was pushed over, the fire was quenched and the oil lamps went off, plunging the house into darkness. All that could be heard was the screams of the women and children as they panicked, running to find an exit in the dark. Yayo tried to escape but was tripped by one of her younger sons who was clinging to her leg in fear, begging her to save him. The bear proceeded to attack them both, clawing at them with his enormous paws. The house guard, Oda, was hidden behind some furniture, but while the bear attacked Yayo and her children, he was spotted. Kazagake quickly turned his attention to the man, and as he tried to flee through the front door, the bear quickly swiped him and scratched deep marks into his back as he fled. This interaction gave Yayo and her children enough time to escape, and they ran from the house, screaming for the other guardsmen to help them. Blood was now covering every corner of the house, as the screams of the injured and dying filled the air. Kazagake then attacked and killed 2 more young boys before turning his attention to Take Ishiguro, who was heavily pregnant at the time. She was cornered by the huge animal and knew she had no chance of escape. She pleaded with the animal to not hurt her unborn child or touch her belly, and to only eat her head. She was quickly attacked, killed, and eaten by the bear, and although the fetus was found alive in her body, it soon died also. In 2 days, 6 people had now died at the hands or paws of Kazagake. The guards had now returned to the cottage, led by a very badly injured Yayo. Although it was dark, they could hear sounds of the attack from within the house, so it was proposed that they would simply burn the house down, as that would surely kill the man-eater. Yayo was convinced that the children inside were still alive and fought against the guards, forbidding it. The guards split into 2 groups and surrounded the hut, but the bear had already left the scene, leaving a path of death and destruction behind him. As the injured were taken to a safe house, Miyoki Yasutaro sought for a solution. He had lost 2 children and his wife was gravely hurt, so he was desperate to be rid of the bear that was terrorizing the town. He had heard of an expert bear hunter who was close by and went to find him. Yamamoto Hakichi is thought to have killed over 300 bears in his lifetime and was somewhat of a local legend. Unfortunately, when Yasutaro arrived, he found that Hakichi had given up his bear hunting days after his pregnant wife was murdered by a bear many years ago and had since become an alcoholic. He had been working to catch Kazagake for many years, as there had been a similar attack which had killed 3 women in the past, but once his wife was killed, he had given up on life itself. However, when he heard the full extent of the most recent attack and how helpless the villagers were, he finally agreed to join them and kill the bear once and for all. The next few days were spent with several different teams trying to find and kill the bear. He had ransacked the locals' food and damaged 8 houses by now, and the situation was becoming desperate. The men even used the corpse of Mayu to attract the bear, which angered many members of the village, as they believed the plan was disrespectful to the dead. Regional police had now heard about the attack and sent a sniper team to kill Kazagake, but they couldn't find him either. Finally, 5 days after the first sighting of the bear, he was finally shot and killed by Yamamoto Hakichi. with one shot to the heart and another to the head. The rampage was over. Sadly, this event caused the destruction of the village. Although Yayo survived, her young son died years later of his injuries, and due to the horrific events that unfolded, people began to leave to find somewhere else to settle instead. Eventually, they all abandoned the area, leaving it to the bears and the ghosts of the past. There is now a shrine to pray for the dead villagers called the Bear Harm Cenotaph, and the story of Kazugake has passed into legend, a constant reminder of the man-eating bear and the innocent lives it brought to their unfortunate final affliction. Getting in the wilderness can be a great thing to do. Reconnecting with nature and relaxing in the great outdoors can really help bring perspective back to one's life. But what do you do when nature comes to you? This is a question that one elderly woman found the answer to in the most extreme way. When people talked about Adelia Trujillo, they would always mention how full of life she was and how she was a woman who knew her own mind and sense of self. This could be seen through how she lived her life. Instead of buying the latest technology or being connected to the rest of the world through things like smartphones and laptops, Adelia preferred to live a more simple life. Despite this simpler way of living, though, Adelia's friends always said she was a larger-than-life character. With a spunky and strong-willed personality, Adelia was a force to be reckoned with, so much so that she insisted on staying in her small, tin-roofed house in Mora, New Mexico, which she had bought with her husband and where they raised their children. Adelia also took care of her grandchildren in that very same house, teaching them the traditions of her heritage. At 93 years old, Adelia was also still incredibly fit, as she didn't even need a walking stick to get around. The hardy old woman would often spend her days cooking her food on a wooden stove, but it was her faith that kept her going day by day. Adelia was a deeply religious person, and she would make sure to go to church every Sunday, as it helped her feel closer to God. Her grandson, Richard Ortega, would tell people that the older woman knew that she wasn't alone, as she had her belief in God to guide her. He also mentioned that she would often go around blessing people and wishing the best for them in life. Whoever met Adelia often agreed that she was a kind, sweet, and deeply religious person who could get along with anyone. But no one could have seen what would happen next. It had started as a normal day for Adelia. She had gotten up, completed her morning prayers, and began to go about her normal daily routine. Whether that would be going out to the Senior Citizen Center to say hello to her friends, or simply staying at home to play some solitaire, she did not know. However, she wasn't one to rush about, and she would choose what to do based on how she felt that particular day. But as the older woman was busy tidying up her home and sorting through some washing that needed to be done, she was stunned when her back door was suddenly barged open. Being a small home, it didn't take long for Adelia to get to the kitchen to see exactly what was going on. Thinking that it could be someone breaking in to steal some of her belongings, not that she had much in the way of expensive items, the older woman still did not want any of her more sentimental items being taken. She was ready to give the burglar a piece of her mind, but when she came face to face with the intruder, she could not believe her eyes. Standing in the doorway of her kitchen was a huge black bear. Startled at the discovery and extremely scared, Adelia let out a startled scream. She knew that the bear was dangerous and that it could easily overpower her in seconds if it should so choose to do so. The older woman would be no match for the huge animal. Unfortunately, her startled scream also alerted the bear to her presence and scared the creature. It is well known that when facing an animal such as a bear, the best thing to do is to react calmly and try to make yourself look as big as possible to try and warn the bear away from you. It is suggested that you wave your arms above your head and tell the bear to back off. It is advised that you do not make any sudden movements or sounds, as it could scare the bear and cause them to attack. Sadly, Adelia didn't know these rules, and in her fright, she tried to run away from the bear. Seeing the older woman as a form of prey, the bear charged into the house after her. It only took a few seconds for the bear to catch up to Adelia, who knew that she stood no chance against the beast. As the wild animal began to tear into the older woman, Adelia was consumed in fear. Despite her age, she was not ready to leave the world. But it seemed as if she would not get a choice in the matter. The only thing that comforted the woman was that she believed that God would look after her, no matter the outcome of the situation. A few hours later, Adelia's grandson decided to go and check on his grandmother. He only lived next door, although the houses were spread out a little bit, and he liked to check in on his grandmother to make sure that she was okay and had everything she needed in terms of food and other necessities. However, this time when he went round, the sight that greeted him was one that would scar him forever. As Richard entered his grandmother's home, he instantly noticed the mess that indicated that something terrible had happened. He quickly made his way through the house, calling for Adelia the entire time, but when he found her a few moments later, he was brought to tears. The old woman had been mauled by the bear and was subsequently no longer alive. Immediately, Richard called the police, who put an alert out for the bear and began to hunt for it. In the state of New Mexico, it is common law to hunt down and euthanize an animal if it has attacked a human. This is so that it can be tested for diseases such as rabies, which could have affected its behavior, and to stop it from harming any other humans, as it is thought that after a successful attack, they may lose their fear of humans, which keeps them away from populated areas. In the case of Adelia, it took a few hours for the police to locate the correct bear. They managed to find it roughly half a mile away from the old woman's house. In the end, it was established that the bear was a 4-year-old male black bear, weighing roughly 250 pounds. Whilst this was an extremely shocking and upsetting attack, officials did stress the fact that it was also incredibly rare for a wild animal like a bear to attack and fatally harm anyone, especially in their home. In fact, at the time of the attack on Adelia, it was the first one in New Mexico to end in a fatality in over a century of record-keeping. Whilst officials weren't 100% sure why the bear attacked Adelia, some locals thought that it was due to the scant availability of food that year. The weather had been quite bad, with a combination of dry conditions, leaving plants with little water, and then a killer frost which happened late into the springtime, meaning that hardly any food grew, which the bears could eat. Even the orchards in the town of Mara were bare. This lack of food could have been one of the reasons why the black bear had wound up in front of Adelia's home that fateful day. With no natural fruits and berries for the animal to eat, it could have possibly wandered close to Adelia's home, hoping to find some rubbish that it could root through. It is also highly possible that it wasn't the first time the animal had looked through someone's bins for a meal. However, this time, after finding no available food outside, the bear possibly wandered into the house to see if it could locate something tasty inside. Little did both the bear and Adelia know what would happen at their chance encounter. But after seeing a small, frail woman who looked like a potential meal, the bear didn't hesitate to bring Adelia to her terrifying final affliction.